Moshe Sinai. These are the things that have been accepted and have never been disputed. But we'll see today, for example, their lively discussion, right? Where one sage challenges another's interpretation of a verse or his use of a biblical verse to support an argument, right? And that is really the essence of it. There is constant challenge because it's not, as I said, it's really it's not a code. It's, I guess, a multivalent, multivocal text, a chorus of voices that are coming together, and because they're Jewish voices, they're very dissonant and loud and disagreeing with each other and answering questions with questions. So that's what I hope to really bring out today and show you pretty much how all those voices come together on one page, accumulated over time to make this work that we call the Talmud. Okay, so last class we talked about the Mishnah, and when we say the Mishnah, what I really need to specify is the Mishnah. The Mishnah of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Okay. Meaning that what happened by the year 200, a lot of teachings, of laws, of sayings, of comments were floating around. I talked about these photos that are all floating around, and different sages are actually compiling essentially their own sort of greatest hits, or their own photo albums, and teaching them, right? What seems to have happened was the collection that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi made was the best, right? Or best maybe isn't the right word, but I think the key term is the accepted, authoritative digest of the teachings of all of those Mishnayot, really. Mishnayot being the plural, right? That had been circulating up to that time. Okay, so there were all these photographs that had been taken, and Rebbe, as we refer to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, made the authoritative collection. I just want to direct you to this table that I spent too much time on. But it came out okay. What I really wanted to show you was the complete development, right, of what I've been referring to as the Oral Torah, really from the year 40 of the Common Era, really until the present. There's certain things that I could have filled in a little bit better, but because they're not the focus today, I've just filled in mostly what was relevant to what we're talking about, which is up until this point, meaning up until the year 200 to 220, the era of the Tanaim, the scholars that we refer to as the Tanaim, whose work is represented in the Mishnah of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Now, of course, there are all these photos on the floor or in other people's albums or in other people's drawers, and they're still circulating and they're floating around, and they don't really get thrown away. They don't get lost. They don't just disappear. Some of them are collected. Actually, many of them are collected in sort of what's considered a parallel collection, which is the Tosefta. Now, there's a scholarly debate about when exactly it was put together. Tosefta meaning literally the addition. So it's understood traditionally as the addition to the Mishnah. Meaning these are Mishnayot, meaning little snippets of the oral law that were collected according to the same principle of organization as the Mishnah, meaning 6 orders, right? And within each order, different tractates, right? It is based on a discussion. Pretty much the theme of the Mishnayot in this chapter are you live in a courtyard, you share space with other people, but what happens when you need to, do a public works project in your courtyard, right? There are all kinds of questions come up, like, well, I think it's a good idea for me if we, put up this little, I don't know, petting zoo. But, it's in public space, Can I reasonably ask other people to contribute to it, right, if it's not really in their interest? Or I want to build a wall to protect my property, right? You could say that's also in other people's interest because they get to share the wall as well, separates their property as well. Should they participate in it?
It's the body corporate law started.
It's pretty much, it is body, it's like, it's body corporate, but blown out, as we'll see in this Mishnah. It starts from the level of the courtyard, right, the shared courtyard, to the shared city, right? And when we apply it to today, I think we're talking on the level of the state, right? So I think that's sufficient background. Now, what I tried to do is this. In order to show you the many layers, right, historical layers, right, that we have on this one page, what I did is I color-coded, okay? Sources, right, again, using the analogy of the patchwork quilt, sources, meaning individual patches, right, that belong to the generation of the Tanaim. And I colored those green, right? Tanaim means green. Anything that came from the Tanaim is green. Okay. So for example, the first few boxes you'll see there in the Hebrew, it's not necessary to read the Hebrew or understand it, but just to see that those pieces are Tanaitic. Okay. Now, there's another thing that happens when you're making a patchwork quilt, which is you need thread, I guess, or you need something to sew it together, right? Otherwise it falls apart. And this is, I think, one of the amazing things about the Talmud, which is, it is, like the patchwork quilt is made together, someone pretty much has a kind of an understanding of how the pieces are put together. So is the Babylonian Talmud, and so is each sugya. There's someone, or someone's, people generally, who are weaving these things together. We'll see that how do we know who they are? How do we know what they're doing? Well, that's a debate, but we can say with some level of agreement that they are anonymous, right? There is no name associated with this layer, and it is always in Aramaic, right? Why is that important? Everyone says, well, the Babylonian Talmud, all of it's in Aramaic. Actually, if we want to talk about what is only in Aramaic, this anonymous layer is only in Aramaic, right? The way to understand it is sort of like if you were to go to, I don't know, I'm making a generalization, something that I don't know at all. You go to Adas right now and you learn Gemara with them. They're reading the text in the original, right? But when they give their understandings, right, they speak Yiddish, or maybe they speak English, or I just want to think they speak Yiddish. So they speak Yiddish, right? And Aramaic, right, of the Amora, for the Amoraim and those who came after them, is their Yiddish. That's their spoken language. That's the language in which they discussed, right? Whereas the statements of the scholars, right, even if they spoke Aramaic or were recorded, at least 85% of the time, in the Amoraim, 85% of the time are recorded in Hebrew. Okay, so it's not always clear when you just look at the language, who is it, an Amora, or is it this anonymous layer? But for the time being, we'll just call this, it's called in many names, right? The early commentators, who became aware of this, right? They simply called it stama, meaning anonymous. Sometimes they called it stama de Talmuda, or stama de Gemara, or sometimes they just call it Talmuda, meaning what the Talmud itself does, right? But this is anonymous. So in this sugya, there really isn't very much, but there's a little bit. Okay, then the bulk of it is the Amoraim, right? I made them red. Someone comes and says the Mishnah. Ari, will you say the Mishnah for us, please?
In English?
In English, please.
He, a resident of a courtyard, may be compelled by rest to contribute to the building of a porter's lodge and a door for the courtyard.
Very good, thank you very much. Is it clear the situation is, right? So we are all living on this courtyard, right? According to this opinion, right, body corporate, right, could come along and pretty much say to anybody, you know what, we need a door for the courtyard and you gotta contribute, right? You don't have a choice in the matter, you have to contribute. Everyone in this courtyard must contribute to building that, okay? So that's this opinion. This opinion right now is anonymous, right? No name is attached to it. And when that happens in the Mishnah, we assume, usually, especially when it's the first opinion, that it's the majority opinion. What I'm talking about, so it's not just a door, but it's also this full security apparatus, right? Okay, so it's anonymous. We understand that if it's anonymous, it's not named, it was the majority opinion, and that usually, in most cases, not all, we go by this opinion. However, Ari, would you continue and tell us what
I'll just say something. It doesn't say they have to be compelled, they may be compelled.
Ah, very good. Excellent. So what's the difference?
Well, one would depend on circumstances, the other one is you just have to do it.
Right. So, but the thing is it seems to be, though, if we wanted to do it, right, if we were a courtyard, right, and, we come to some kind of agreement that we want to do it, and there's one person who's sort of recalcitrant, that person really can't opt out of payment.
Democracy, rule, situation.
Majority rules, right? Majority rules, and it's basically encoding in law that it is a reasonable expectation, right, to do that, to ask a person to do that. We'll get later an interpretation, right? A later interpretation, but that's pretty much the fundamental assumption. Okay, please, Vita.
I imagine one would go to the Beth Din. If one person was a standout, the rest of the people would go to the court and get a ruling.
That's an excellent question about when you go to Beit Din and when you don't go to Beit Din. Usually, most of the sages, the Tanaim and the Amoraim, want to they want to keep people away from the Beit Din. They don't like bureaucracy. They don't like backlogs. They want justice to be done. And they want to give you principles by which you can conduct your lives fairly, right? So basically they're saying, okay, because we have someone who's recalcitrant, but we know that basically we've got a good case here, right? And that person really, if they went to the Beit Din, what can they? Yeah, I mean they pretty much don't seem to have a case there. Okay, further, all right.
Rabban Simeon Gamliel, however, says that not all court accounts require a porter's lodge.
Okay, very good. So how does he modify this law? It's just anyone, right? How is he modifying it?
Depends on the courtyard.
What he's saying depends on the courtyard. It's not every courtyard in which I can come to somebody and say, we're making a fence, or we're making a guardhouse, you have to come participate. Some courtyards are different. What's important is that it doesn't tell us exactly what kind of difference, right? Why would one courtyard be fitting for a gate and why wouldn't be? That information is absent here. Okay, can you continue, all right?
He, a resident of the city, may be compelled to contribute to the building of a wall, folding doors, and a crossbar.
Okay, just continue, just finish it.
Rabban Simeon Gamliel says that not all towns require a wall.
Very good. Okay. So it's really beautiful literary structure. It's all very parallel, right? First, he takes the level of the courtyard, and the Mishnah applies pretty much the same principles to the level of the city, right? Just as in the courtyard we say that you can compel people to contribute to security, so too in the city you can compel people, or people are pretty much by law expected to contribute to the security. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, right, I put him on the list just to show you where he is historically. He's the fourth generation of the Tanaim, right, so around the year 135 to 170. Says, wait a second, okay, not in all cases can you do this. First, not in all courtyards and not in all cities, right? Okay, so that's the Mishnah.